Good morning and welcome to the video for Monday, June the 8th. This is going to be our video for upcoming third graders, and we're going to be working with different types of graphs today. So the second chapter in our book is going to deal all with different types of graphs, and we will use this information throughout the year. So there are three different types of graphs that we're going to be working with. I've also included this tally table. So when we're working with problems, we may see something like this, and we're going to have to count the tally marks to get the numbers that we can use to make a graph. Our types of graph are picture graphs, where we have a key that is going to tell us what each symbol is going to be worth. So if I look at this one and I want to know how many students walk to school, each of these smiley faces is worth 10 students, so I can count by tens to get 10, 20, 30 students that walk to school. Whenever you're working with this type of graph, or in some cases also the bar graph, but the bar graph's a little bit easier to figure out because it already has numbers, the first thing I always recommend any student do is to go ahead and write out the numbers to the side. I'm going to have 30 students that walk to school. I'm going to have 40 students that bike. I have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 students that ride the bus. And I have 60 students that take a car. And now with those numbers, I don't have to keep constantly going back and double checking as I'm answering questions. One of the things that we have to do with picture graphs is occasionally represent half of something. We can do that very easily with a bar graph because we can just put a bar in between wherever our numbers that are labeled go. But what we have to do, if we're counting by fours, we're going to have 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. I'm going to have 4, 8, 12, and then I have half a symbol. So I'm going to have to take my total for 4, cut it in half, which is going to be 2, and do 12 plus 2, which gives me 14. And then I've got 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24. And so with these numbers, I can now answer all the questions that I would be asked to answer. Let's take a look at bar graphs. So one of the most important things with bar graphs is understanding what we need to do when we create them. Reading them is usually pretty easy. When we create them, we are going to use a scale, and that scale is going to be consistent. We can't say, oh, I'm going to count by twos to get to this point, and then I'm going to count by fours as I keep going. It's got to be the same number. So for both of these examples, one being horizontal, one being vertical, they decided to count by fours. So each line is going to be a multiple of 4. And with the horizontal bar graph, we are going to read going out to the right to get our number. And so I have ice skating would be 20 students that chose that. I'm halfway between 12 and 16, which means I would have 14 students that picked that. 24 students picked sledding, and halfway between 16 and 20 is 18, so 18 students picked hockey. We're going to add the same numbers on this side, but we would be reading vertically. So we would go up to get to that number. So 20, 14, 24, and 18. A line plot is going to be our last type of graph, and we are going to see this very frequently. I don't have a way to represent exactly what I would normally ask you to do. A type of question that we might get with this is how many students have at least 6 letters in their first name? And so to get that answer, I would need to count up all of my students that have 6, all of my students that have 7, and all of my students that have 8. If I wanted to know how many students have less than 6 letters in their name, then I would be counting all of the X's for 5, 4, and 3. So that is a frequent question that you will definitely see, especially as we get into test prep questions. One of the things, if you are making a graph and you're trying to figure out what type of graph to choose, if you have a wide variety of numbers, then you are not going to want to use this. You're going to want it to use a line plot for things that all of the answers are relatively close together. So what is the height of each student in a third grade classroom. We can get that in inches, and because everyone is going to be close enough together in height, even if there are some people that are much taller than others, we could easily represent that on this. If I want to take my 3 books, so for instance, I have a book on robotics that will be in my classroom at some point, but it's sitting at home. This book has 64 pages. I have a Wings of Fire graphic novel that has 217 pages. And I have a collection of short stories, I have a collection of short stories, I can't talk very well today, that comes out to about 480 pages. So if I wanted to change this to be the number of pages in books around the house, I would have such a large number difference that it would not be practical to try to use this. It could be represented in a bar graph, but I would need to pick a very large number, let's say at least 20 probably, to be able to get to my largest number being 480. So one of the things that I would suggest that you try to do with this at home is to find something that you could gather the data for, and then choose what type of graph you might do. You could do something like, if you have siblings, you and your siblings, how many pairs of shoes do each of you have? Or how many pairs of socks? How many pairs of shorts? How many t-shirts you have in the drawer? Things like that can work. A common question that you might see represented with a graph is, how many pets do certain families have? So if I polled everyone in the upcoming third grade classroom for how many pets you have at home, then I could probably represent that using either a line plot or a bar graph, or possibly a picture graph. So think of something that you could do that you could get the data for, and then try to make a picture graph for that. Hope that helps. This is more of kind of an informational thing. If you want to do the practical exercise, you're more than welcome to. We will be doing exact examples like that in our Go Math book when we get back to school in the fall. Hope you have a wonderful day, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video, which will be a week from today.